emphasized by the ministers, the delegations, that the future is now. Taking this forward, I'm the moderator of the session. It's AI driving the autonomous networks of the future. With me, we have our esteemed panelist. We have Mr. Ajay Jain, Senior Vice President at Bharti Airtel, and he will talk about a lot of things that he is doing from an automation standpoint. Please, with a round of applause, let's welcome Mr. Ajay Jain. Next, we have Mr. Ramesh, Head of Pre-Sales HP Telco Solutions for the Asia Pacific and Japan region. He has been at the forefront of driving innovation in the sector. We have Mr. Vijay from Cisco. He's a distinguished architect, leads autonomous network transformation solutions. For Cisco, we have Mr. Abe, CTO at Nokia. He will throw insights from an expertise in the telecom sector and the emerging tech. We have Mr. Hardeep Saini, Senior Director, Qualcomm India, who is responsible driving growth across LTE 5G technologies in the region. We have Mr. Jaswant Boyat, Head of System Engineering, India and SAARC region. With more than 2 decades of experience, he'll talk about his experiences about 4G, 5G, and the emerging tech. We have Mr. Arno Van, of CTO Telco for Canonical. He's our international guest. We welcome him on this panel. I think even the last session was talking about how AI is driving the autonomous network. Taking the discussion forward, enough has been said, AI is going to revolutionize. But, do we really look at the way that we understand? So maybe the first question to Mr. Ajay, we have been seeing the networks since a while, okay? The networks 3 years ago, the networks today, we are talking about proactive monitoring. We're talking about how can we bring in autonomous or automation in the network. I think firstly, it would be great to understand, are we interchanging the technologies like automation, AI, autonomous, zero-touch automation? How should we look at the future of the network operations?
Thanks. I think that's a great question. We hear so much of jargons about automation, AI, and multiple applications, which are, using these technologies. So from a consumer, let's look at it from a consumer standpoint. What he's looking forward to is he's looking forward to a excellent service as a network operator, as a service provider. What he's looking forward to is all these technologies should come together and give him great experience from his perspective rather than from a network perspective. I think that's where all these technologies are coming together. Now let's take a deep dive into what these technologies have to offer. There are various challenges from an operator standpoint if we have to embrace these technologies. If we look into AI envisages that there's a large amount of data correlation logics to be implemented so that we can bring out a lot of insights. From an autonomous network standpoint, there are real-time processing of data, creating insights, and then implementing those, are very, very paramount. Now, where are we in terms of, from an operator standpoint, in embracing these technologies? There is a lot of work which has happened, in the operator fraternity, and the technologies is allowing us to use this in a large number of applications, and the number of applications which comes to our mind is network optimization, smart network optimization. As an operator, we generate large amounts of data. We are correlating all the data to be able to identify patterns, to be able to identify issues so that we can proactively and predictably add capacities, optimize the networks. SON, if you already have heard about it, self-optimizing networks, it's a great way to identify anomalies, great systems to optimize the networks on the go. Then as an operator, we are very much focused on green energy to ensure that we are deploying solutions, which are helping us to drive the green initiative. AI and all these automations comes together to ensure that we are able to drive the benefits of that. And most important is the cost. A lot of the mundane tasks are done by automation, and AI is helping there in a larger ways. Thus, to some substance, if I want to summarize, both automation and lately the AI and generative AI are helping us to create solutions, which drives us to serve better from a customer standpoint.
Thank you, Ajay ji. Maybe move on to Mr. Ramesh. I think we just mentioned about self-optimizing networks. I think we are hearing enough about self-healing networks, configuration networks, but it needs a seamless integration of technology as well as the hardware. How do you look at the networks today? Because we have moved from legacy technologies and now we're talking about 5G, which is virtualization. How do you think the synergies are going to happen?
I guess AI is a great enabler or great driving force for these things. And I would like to give you industry insight as to where we are and where we are headed into these three areas. If you look at the self configuration first, I think automation of, let's say, setup, automation of configuration has already been achieved. We have seen that the policy driven optimization, some people like to call it as intent driven, say intent based automation, intent based configuration, that has been achieved. But what has been not yet added into that, user preference, for example, user preferential learning. Take for example, if in a district, if I'm setting up some VPNs, if I know that they have the preference for say low latency communication, so those kind of preferences, learned preferences, that has not yet been integrated. While policy driven, rule based things has been already been achieved. Second thing is about the, let's say, the contextual awareness. When I'm configuring certain network, what is the context, for example, what is the current KPIs, what are the current solution, I mean, what are the current traffic load that these things are carrying, which should impact my configuration. That part has not yet been achieved. That is still being under being done. If you look at the second part of it, say self-optimization. In terms of self-optimization, I guess the first thing is, let's say, the capability with respect to automation of, let's say, in the configuration aspect of it. When you do the configuration, self optimization part of it, the most important thing that you would like to achieve there is, let's say, say the automation of, say your automation of your automation of your, let's say, capabilities with respect to anomaly detection, for example. Okay, of course, anomaly detection does not fall into self-configuration aspect of it. Self-configuration has got to do more with the performance capability aspect of it. I would like to tell you two things or two or three important things that we have done in the past in self-configuration aspect. One of the performance data collection. You see, when we are collecting data from network element, there are thousands of KPIs and metrics that you collect day in, day out. There are, I think what I understand is for 5G, a 5G G node B would give you more than 2.5K KPIs type. Now, an operation team will be inundated with these metrics and they would not like to make, they would not like to make any sense out of it. So what we had, one smart thing that we have done is with respect to smart metrics. So these 2.5K metrics have been modeled into, say, for example, something called smart metrics. So main 20-30 metrics are actually depicting or giving a representative of these 2.5K metrics. A very smart thing. Similarly, we are also taking care of, for example, some missing values. We know all when these KPIs are transported from the field to the, let's say, the NOC, many times these things are missed. So we are also using these performance metrics for using predictive values. For example, in case some KPI is missed in a particular certain period of time, what will be the value of those things? Similarly, we are also taking care of the self-healing aspect of it, the anomaly detection, the most important capability that's being talked about today. So we are doing anomaly detection not only in the KPI, which is most often the case. We are also taking care of the event part as well. For example, say pattern detection. One very important use case that we have done for an operator is with respect to identifying pattern for fire and smoke. Say there was a particular infrastructure company for which we are setting up this NOC, and we looked at the event that happened in last 6 months, then identified what led to a fire and smoke situation. Looked at the pattern discovery analysis, the machine learned pattern discovery, and we identified what is the sequence of events which lead to these kind of scenarios. So even if we can give them some 15 minutes well in advance information that a fire and smoke situation is about to happen, I think it's a great value add.
Taking this point further to Mr. Vijay, I think we spoke about huge data sets, that are helping to detect anomalies or the patterns. But it's also all about how effectively the governance is, because with the AI, there are a lot of considerations on the ethical aspect and the regulatory framework, which does not exist as we speak. How do you look at to moving forward?
Yeah, it's a very important topic, right? Think of the regulatory aspect, in terms of like how you do today for the data, right? Uh, you have like local regulation, GDPR and other stuff, right? So you need to make sure that you have to follow the existing regulation, which are local, right? Now, in terms of the data, right? I mean, you're training the model. When you're training the model, the data that goes in may be available for everyone. So it's very important that we need to do the masking, right? To not let the data leak out, right? And then also if you look at most of your level of the data today, right? You have confidential data, highly confidential, all those things you need to really maintain that with the AI model. If you don't do that, it's going to cause a lot of regulatory issues, right? Now, coming to the ethical aspect, right? I mean, you have seen enough information out there, like a lot of against the Google or Meta and all those things, saying that hey, look, AI showing bias, right? It's like showing a particular person all the time, right, of a color and gender, right? Same thing actually will apply even in the network, right? You don't want to provide your agent, for example, with for example, hey, he's a premium customer, he or she is a premium customer. I'm going to give an additional data versus someone who is not a premium customer, right? So very important that you don't show any kind of bias, and you need to be very fair in how the model is going to respond to the customers, right? And the other aspect that we also have to keep in mind is the authorization and authentication, right? So your agent should be providing a proper dual factor authentication, so that you have a role based access. So you don't want someone else accessing the data if they are not authorized to access particular data, right? So most of your security rules that you are going to be implementing should also come into the agents, right? And finally, coming to the governance aspect, right? See, this is not like a science project anymore, right? Because when you are feeding the data is coming from all your organizations, right? So there is a very important aspect that the stakeholders from every organization should be involved in terms of providing the governance, right? And in addition, what I would suggest is that you create the green and red team. Make sure that what data is going in is completely sanitized, right? And what I mean, every time there may be some leaking happening, right? You don't want that to happen, right? So you need to monitor that, right? And finally, I'll just tell you, right? I mean, even in my company, right, we have a responsible AI organization, right? So what we do with that is today, any security development that happens, we have a secure development lifecycle, right? What we have done now is we have implemented this responsible AI as part of our security development lifecycle. So the tools are going to monitor what private information is going to go in, right? If by any chance, if there is any leakage of PII data or GDPR data, whatever, we're going to flag that and make sure that there is violations are going to be captured, right? So
Thank you, Vijay. Maybe Abhay, a dollar question for you. We all talk about emerging tech, every year, some new technology coming, and we are, start investing in those technologies. But from a customer standpoint, everybody is looking for an ROI. I know AI has some use cases when it talks about network design, implementation, operation and maintenance. But how can we, look at the operational efficiencies? Second, is there a real ROI that we can bring out with the AI? Or I think we're just confusing with analytics in the AI.
Excellent question, because see, we as technologists, we always tend to get biased whenever there is a new kid on the block. And since last 2 years, we have been seeing AI as the new kid on the block. There is another thing that we are discussing here today, and you can see in the topic, which is called autonomous network. That's also the new kid in the block. These are the buzzwords, right? So if you, it's very easy. You type all those things on your Chat GPT-4 app and you will get all the answers that you want to from a technological perspective. I'll talk from a practical perspective from my experiences. I've spent close to about 35 years now in telecom, most of it on the operator side of it. So I'll talk it from that standpoint. The most important aspect here is what the question is related to ROI. And when you are talking about ROI, the lesson that I learned as an operator is 3 fundamental principles that you follow when you want to implement any project. First of all, जो ठीक चल रहा है उसको छेड़ो मत. So whatever is working well, please don't touch it. That's the biggest lesson that I learned as an operator. The second big lesson that I learned is whenever you are wanting to do a change, look at whether it is going to give you incremental revenue. So if you want to do autonomous network, if you want to do AI, if you want to implement anything across board, ask yourself a question whether whatever I'm going to do, is this future and is this going to make money for me in the future? If it is not, again coming back to principle 1, ठीक चल रहा है चलने दो, मत छेड़ो. The third important aspect that I learned on this particular aspect is, it is very easy to conceptualize very big and large projects. The most important thing, particularly in these 2 topics of autonomous and AI, are conceptualize small and use case oriented. Coming to the question that he asked, whether there is ROI, if you follow these 3 principles, 1, you are doing it for something which will bring incremental revenue, and you are doing it for small and use case oriented, it is likely to fetch ROI. If you are doing a large scale project, I'm sorry, it's not going to help. Please look at it, some data points, maybe about 15-20 days back or last month, in Economic Times, there was an article which talked about the cost of training a model, which is what is fundamental to AI. And the cost that it said was, if you look at ChatGPT-4, for training an LLM model on ChatGPT-4 on cloud, the cost is close to $75 million. Now, if you are talking about ROI, how much money is needed for you in order to be generated to get a train the LLM model, which will cost you $75 million. So bottom line, if you start small, look at use cases which are really needed for you, which can give you incremental value and incremental money. That's where you start. That's where your ROI will be. Otherwise, these are all fancy projects with big names, good buzzwords, but they will not yield you money. Thank you.
Sure. Maybe over to you, Hardeep. I think all these technologies, I think it takes some time to incubate. And there's a gestation period. And we always say that there's a partnership ecosystem that needs to build. Do you think we have the ecosystem that is ready for the network operations to be fully AI driven?
So I think Abhay started that discussion by saying that you have to go small, go very narrowly defined use cases, and I completely agree with that approach. I think we, as a technology providers to kind of a broad ecosystem, the way we think about it is more of this as a systems issue rather than kind of looking at it like a very broad-based thing. So when you have systems, what are the things you have control over? What are the things you have data for? What are the things you can do traditional AI? So one of the things I think we have to understand is there are some things which are done probably with traditional AI can do better job. AI was kind of generative AI just came in recently, right? You had AI running, I think, on your phone. You always had the ability to enhance the picture, change color, change backdrop, all that. And now it's just that we are getting more and more sophisticated with generative AI, but some of those models existed. I think the idea here is there are things which you can do with traditional AI, which are more rule-based, which we define as network operator, for example, and it will give you desired results within certain ranges, right? That's one. The other element is with generative AI, what are the various things you could do? You have large amount of data, can you train it? Where do you train it? And what is the cost? Can you do it on an ongoing basis? Because more and more data will be accessible as well. So those are the two elements in general. And then I think the other element you have to think about is you have various network data points. There will be some AI on the device, there will be some AI in the network, there will be some AI at the RAN level, there will be some AI at the core level. You have to harmonize all of these components. You have to think kind of abstract one level up, and then that's where you implement, right? And eventually I think what probably Holy Grail will be, what operators would want to do is more what we call intent-based AI. I am a CTO of an organization. I want my capacity to be traded off with user experience. So there's nothing for free, right? If I want higher capacity, I might have to degrade my user experience slightly. So I have one particular site which is, for example, heavily loaded. What do? I could degrade my voice experience slightly. I could degrade my data experience. So there are trade-offs available, but you should be able to say that this is how I want to do a trade-off, and you should be able to provide a simple text, and it should be implementable in the network. That will be, in my views, a holy grail of where we need to go. At least the first, I would say, first kind of base camp, if you will.
Thank you. Taking this forward to Mr. Jaswant. I think we heard about AI, generative AI. Panelists spoke about responsible AI, ethical AI, and then intent-driven AI. Now, we have so many AIs coming in. I know in the maturity stages, we all talk about, maybe for us, it's an interchangeable. How do you think the use cases are developing up globally? And when it comes to network operations specifically, in your view, where can we see that AI is going to take this further?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think if I have to summarize all the discussions and try to link it with use cases, it is very important, like how we can leverage these tools, particularly from a day-to-day operations, because ultimately network needs to be operated and generate some monetizations revenue for the customers, right? So I see it like a self-config, self-optimizations, and the self-healing. These are, yes, good to hear. This looks like a buzzwords, but at a practical level, how we can achieve this, So what we do is, normally from a network standpoint, the network should speak and give some KPI in terms of the states, because unless until from a network we don't get the state, what is the things happening in the network layer, you can't do anything, So what we feel is that there has to be a data lake kind of environment where the entire communications from the network gets captured with the timestamps, and then you can start thinking about how can I optimize my network. So give an example, like since we are present in a lot of hyperscalers and a lot of data centers, we can do a self-config more from a, how can we create a validated design, and the validated designs can be taken from a reference point of view. So you take the references from all the config which is available globally with our customers, we discuss with our customers, and then we go into that, test it as a validate, and then deploy. That's a one use case. Second one is from optimization standpoints, the networks will give you the all the KPIs from a latency, jitters, priorities, and all those things, particularly from a training standpoint, when you have all those things, you need to give the feedback. So there is a closed loop environment. That's what you have to do. Unless you do a closed loop, you can't take the next steps. And finally, from a healing standpoint, it's about how much of control you want to give it to the agent, because ultimately agent has to take a decision, or how much you can take it with the human. So that's linked with the next discussion is of trust. Like, from the machine, how much you can trust. I can give you a very simple example. Let's say the cooling systems in the large data centers like a Google, and we know they have trained everything from a cooling standpoint. They can take decision, but it's a very risk-free decision. But when it comes to traffic engineering, you have a backbone, MPLS network of operators. Can you give the full confidence, the authority to the agent and do that? It may jeopardize your VoLTE traffic. It may jeopardize your packet code. Would you like to take that call? So that kind of things are there. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Taking this to Mr. Arno. Arno, every day, or maybe every hour we see organizations are declaring themselves that we are AI compliant. We have AI solutions. But when it talks about the data sets, we need huge data sets to build the AI platforms. How do you think the scalability part of an AI? Because one is the complexity, second is the capacity. And obviously we need the higher upgraded systems to build those platforms. So how do you think the scalability is a challenge, or we can say we have scalable AI driven use cases?
So seeing that the topic is autonomous networks as an outcome at the end of a journey, which is impacted by several different technologies, AI being that main buzzword of the last 2 years, I think it's important to understand that AI on its own as an impacting technology to drive intelligent decisions into a network requires several fundamental building blocks to have been in place in your network. If the organization itself, if the telco operator itself is uneasy with automation, for instance, there is no inference aspect to the AI. The AI may come up with a really intelligent solution to capacity problem or power consumption saving or the ability to predict where to place the cell tower site. But if there's no automation to that, if there's no ability for that AI to infer that intelligence into the network by an automated way, you lose, right? That organization will not be able to reap the benefit. I've heard really good points here. I think the ROI point for me is very impactful. I see telcos across the globe wanting to do things in AI, wanting to use the outcomes of an autonomous system, of an intelligent base model, of a generative AI approach to save on OpEx, to implement systems that are more intelligent so that they can impact some of their own KPIs, some of their own targets. For me, it's always a question of what is the cost to prove your point, so prove out that first use case. And if the first use case is a single vendor specific AI solution, right, versus a multi-tenant AI solution, then the first use case will cost you the CapEx investment of that first use case, right? So then the ROI you need to have is really high. If you have a system in which your infra team, for instance, has the ability to slice out the capabilities of your infra, your GPUs, the types of infrastructure and networking that you need for all your teams to be able to experiment, it makes a way better business case in the end. There's an upfront investment, but 5 or 10 or 20 different teams in your company can now start iteratively learning what they need to know, then growing that use case, and then scaling that use case. Scaling is the end, right? Scaling is implement as wide as possible to get the most benefit, ROI or KPIs being, or energy efficiency savings. If you don't feel comfortable with the initial steps, either there's a cost impact for you to be able to get started, or vendor X claims something else than vendor Y, then the operator is the one having to make that. I usually say they go into analysis paralysis phase, where they first analyze 5 different vendors' view on a topic before they can get going. If that decision is made, we are going to implement AI in our network, And we are going to try and spend our effort learning how we can have that autonomous system make decisions, whether it's a decision that has a human in the loop to then infer an outcome, or whether it is a fully autonomous level, like if you get to the ITU M3385, the 5 levels of autonomy in the network. If you get to the end stage, if that's your goal, then absolutely the beginning is making some clear decisions that are strategic and across all your teams, not just team A wanting to play with AI, team B wanting to prove something, team C wanting to spend additional money to get their own GPU cluster. So if you have that, then obviously you can use mechanisms where you can optimize the use of large GPU sets or clusters of GPU. A lot of customers, a lot of operators think if they buy a cluster of the latest and greatest H200s or NVIDIA boxes with a lot of capacity, immediately they will have the magic pill that will get them to do AI. You don't always have to train your own base model. Sometimes if it's a call center agent assist or a NOC operations center assist use case, there are good language models that have been trained, and you can augment those with RAG. Those are cheaper ways to get going versus you training your own custom thing on your own data and then retraining or fine-tuning. So I think there's a lot of key decisions on the base technologies that could impact the spend, the cost, and the speed at which you can innovate using AI.
Thank you. Maybe coming back to Mr. Ajay, maybe a quick answer to that. See, we also, look at certain, articles in the references where we say open digital architectures or the open APIs are the key to build the autonomous networks of the future. How do you think, with the ecosystem that we have, where we have multi-vendor environment, and there's so many legacy systems built into it, how do you see this is going to pave it?
I think from an operator standpoint, this is the most complex thing which we are grappling with, because as a brownfield operator, there are multitude of technologies, we have deployed. We have 2G, 4G and 5G networks. We have equipment from various vendors, vendor partners. And it's a complex ecosystem which we've created, to now integrate all these systems to a common framework, to create the data pipelines, to be able to then sieve this data, clean up this data, and use this data either as a RAG or to train a model. That's the most complex part of it. But the outcome, what we look forward to should be that this data is usable, this data is clean, and it should be able to give us outcomes, which can drive either experience or cost. As some of our panelists talked about that, if we are outcome focused, then we know what this data, how this data can be consumed, and the data can deliver an outcome. So I would like to summarize saying that, yes, this is the challenge which we face every day, and I don't think there's a silver bullet to it.
Thank you. Maybe over to you, Mr. Ramesh. I think we are also hearing that AI is going to bring a lot of impact on the sustainability part, maybe on the ESG part. And I think I've seen a lot of articles coming out. How do you look at, because one, we are still figuring out, a question that whether client needs automation, autonomous networks, or an AI, or a generative AI. Or at the second point, we are also jumping on the ESG part. How do you think we can correlate this?
Okay, AI is believed to be reason for increase in demand for data center, energy, and resources. While it is a reason for increase in demand for these resources, but at the same time, AI can very well be used for, say, energy optimization. It can be used for other use cases around preventive maintenance and others, which can lead to energy optimization. Let's take, for example, energy optimization first. So in terms of energy optimization, there are two aspects of it. Energy optimization in data center. If we can meet resources with the demand and we can match them, I think, and where AI can play a very big role, it will be very interesting use case. What we have done in one of the implementation is not only this matching resources with the demand, we have also integrated the requirements with the HVAC system. So, and that has given a lot of dividend. In fact, a lot of energy savings were shown when we integrate these demand and resources along with the HVAC integration. Very interesting use case. Another thing that I would like to talk about is especially in the RAN domain. We have our RAN automation solution, and we are using lot of RAN, lot of AI/ML techniques there for energy utilization. I saw one data point earlier which was saying that about 3/4 of the energy required in operator is actually used for RAN. Okay?
Yes.
And if you can do some optimizing there, it will be a lot of value add. So what we do in AIML in RAN automation is we use clustering techniques, which is unsupervised learning, for identifying sites. See, these sites, some of the sites could be capability sites, coverage sites. We use AIML to identify which sites are candidate for energy optimization. Okay, that's very interesting one. And then once we have done that, then identify what kind of optimizing can be done, whether complete cell site down can take place or whether only carrier shutdown can take place. Those kind of decisions are taken, data-driven decisions, and using AIML. Okay. Second thing is about the preventive maintenance. I see a lot of use case, a lot of interesting insight that AI can give in preventive maintenance. I would again quote one very interesting example, again, which we implemented recently for an operator, for one of our customer, was with respect to, say, preventive maintenance of batteries. Preventive maintenance, what's happening is we are monitoring the charging current of this battery, and looking at the current, we are identifying which battery is a candidate for standing for preventive maintenance, or which is a candidate for replacement. So in my opinion, use cases like this will not only reduce waste.
Can you put them
Okay. So I'm saying these kind of use cases are very interesting one in the sense they are not only helping them increase the longevity of the batteries, but also they are also helping them reduce the waste. So in my opinion, if we can marry AI with the operation, such that these things are, AI use cases are put into use for sustainability aspect of it, I think the future is, we are going to be giving a future which is more sustainable.
Sure, thank you. Vijay, Ramesh just mentioned on the predictive maintenance. And now if we come back specific to network operations, we have heard few words like service reliability engineering, full stack observability, and zero touch automation. Is this what we call it as an autonomous networks, or it's a way beyond?
Sorry, can you repeat the last?
So is it the way we look at the autonomous networks run, having service reliability engineering, zero touch automation, or a full stack observability, or it's a way beyond?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the three foundational block for AI, right? The most important thing is the insight, right? The insight is where you get a lot of analytics, right? And the full observability comes there, because if you don't have all the data, right, then it's very difficult to make the decisions, right? Your decisions will be dependent on how much data you can procure, right? So when you look at the type of analytics data you can gather over time, you have ability to look at the historical data, right? And from historical data you can build your use case that will impact your predictive or prescriptive behavior, right? If you don't mind, I'll just take a few minutes to talk about in the TM forum, right? So in the TM forum, which is probably one of the standard which is way higher of all the other standards out there, they have come up with different levels, right? And when I look at the level of autonomous network, I'll just jump into a level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, right? Level 2 is also a closed loop automation, right? And you need a lot of data. But the thing about level 2 is it is a static rules, right? So you can take some data and then you can use that to make a decision. For example, you can say okay, my interface is picking up CRC errors, right? Which means there is a degradation of the fiber. I can switch over to the other interface, right? But it's a very static rule, right? And the other panelists talked about the intuitive network, where now you are looking at the level 3 and 4, where you are going to talk about the intuitive network in terms of the dynamic policies, right? So how much of your data you're going to get from the network and even beyond will help you to go to the level 3, 4, and 5, right? So I mean, the predictiveness is based on how much data you have. For example, toxic factor detection is one of my favorite use case that I've been doing a lot of work. And for that you need as much data to predict just the health diagnostic, right? Can you predict which of the outlier is going to have the biggest impact, right? And then you can also go into like, the application and from your partners, and will that application have, a behavior on the network, right? So can you like, make some changes on the network to handle, the SLAs and other stuff, right? So the more observability data we can get, we can go beyond, the proactive, predictive, even to the prescriptive, which would bring like, closed loop automation inside a resource domain to like, service domain and even to the business layer.
Thank you. Maybe over to Mr. Abe. Abe, Arno made a very important point on the data centers and the GPUs part, which is the hardware for the building the strong platforms. What do you think could be the hurdle in adopting AI in the network operations or a scale? Is it a hardware issue, or it requires a convergence of the technology, or is it more driven by the customer centricity? That if the ROI will come in, we will adopt ourselves and we will do the further implementations. How do you look at it?
Yeah, just before I answer that question, I would like to add something from the previous question that you asked on. So what we did in Nokia was to very simply put all these three layers in 3 words. So all the tools that we put, so the observability, we call it sense. The data processing part of it, we call it think. And the implementation, or actually fulfilling part of it, we call it act. So it's very simple 3 layers: sense, think, and act, within which this is the framework that we use in terms of putting all the tools and everything together, which can help you implement autonomous network. Coming back to the question of what is the most important part as far as both for autonomous networks or for AI is concerned. Personally, in my opinion, if I have to pick one aspect of it, I would pick up the data sanity or data integrity part of it. And that's a huge task. We can't even imagine, and I would go with what Arno said initially when he was talking about. So, and this is what I would put up to the audience, because they are here in order to gather from our experiences as to what exactly or the way they should look at it. If there are developers sitting out there who can come up with brilliant AI applications, the first test that you should put your AI application to use is, where will I get sanitized data for this application? If I cannot get a sanitized, anonymized data for this particular application, however brilliant your application is, it's crap. So the same thing holds true when we are talking about anything that we want to do for our own network in terms of putting an autonomous framework onto that network. And it's not easy, by the way. Gathering that data, both in terms of capturing it or by probes, filtering it, accumulating it in a data mesh so that you can recall it and collect it and make patterns out of it. That, to me, is the most difficult part. It needs both the hardware and the compute power for the compute capabilities. In order to make it happen, it will cost you, but that's where it is. So the other important aspect is, where should you do it? We talked about the principles that where should you try and do it, because if it is not going to give you huge amount of advantage, don't try to venture into it. Thank you.
Understood. Maybe Hardeep, a quick one. As Abhay also mentioned, we have been talking that this is all driven by the ROI and maybe customer at the center. Now, it's also said that we also need to look at how should we bridge the gap of the competent workforce, because we have the technology, we are building the telco specific LLMs. I think a lot of focus is there. Data is something we are trying to sort, but how about the people part?
So in terms of people, I think the first thing is, I think we have, in terms of the talent, we have a lot of talent available in country on software stack side. So that part I think is kind of not a concern. I think that the thing which probably we need to do is to understand the challenges in terms of which specific areas are AI models probably able to address. You probably will not be able to do LLMs. That's not the intent. But you should be able to pick up very, very narrow definitions of use cases, develop trained models around that, and that helps in terms of whether it's just taking an example, right? If you have, for example, a device, on the device, you can't do everything. But if you have a model which can understand what the user experience is, where does it need to go, and is able to communicate between the lower layers and upper layers, right? Right now, I think the way we work is operator or any technology provider will try to give you a fundamental base throughput or base KPIs, which are typically for the cell edge, right? So that's kind of the worst case scenario. But what you could do is you could probably have a range of KPIs, and depending on the model, you could kind of really tweak, saying that this is the application, this is the requirement. So now I think the demand when it comes to people is going to be how many talented people we have which understand these complexities between layers. Where are the opportunities? You have to also bridge the gap between where kind of everybody is going after kind of developing a large scale model, large language model. We will be very, very probably challenged as far as resources go to tune. I think Abhay already pointed that out, right? So I think my kind of thought is look at specific areas, look at specific applications within that domain, try to then attack it through that rather than kind of spreading very broad based.
Thank you. Maybe just one, I think our fellow panelists talked about the levels of maturity by the TM forum. It seems we are currently at level 2 or level 3, somewhere in between. We're trying to still cover a lot. How do you think, and as a forward looking, how many years should we actually think of as the leaders of the industry that we will be completely able to leverage AI for the network operations?
I think to some extent, some use cases are happening now, okay? And it will again go back to if you have to go to maturity level 5, whether it will take 3 years or 4 years, it's very difficult to predict. However, I think we are into a right directions of getting a maturity level, okay? But there are challenges. There are challenges more from a technology standpoint as well as a social aspect which is linked with the people. Because when you say that you have to take certain decisions, can you 100% rely on the agent to take those decisions? Or you want to say that, okay, there are L3 experts in the NOC who are also competent enough because they have seen the network for 15 years, 20 years. Let's leverage their expertise also. So things like that, when it comes to a low risk decisions, you can completely go 100% on AI to take those decisions. So then I will say it's there. You don't have to wait. Okay, you can take certain decisions right away. But if it is a very complex where there could be a possibility of a service impacting, you probably would like to go back to the admin who can say that yes, you are allowed, not allowed. Even if you have allowed and there is an outage or there is something goes wrong, there has to be a fallback mechanism. You can recall back the config and say that yes, I'm back onto the same state, right? So this is a continuous approach. That's when these ops are there, no? AI ops. So it is not a today or it's like a one shot, you can get it everything, but you have to keep on getting a training into this. And coming back to the questions of related to the challenges and all those things, I would say the skill is also very important. In the older network days, people were supposed to learn BGPs, IGPs and all those things. But today it's all about the policies of AI. Okay. Similarly, when you have to work on a design, there is a link with the services. So usually I will configure the service on a router, I will configure in the packet core or VoLTE and all those things. But today it's a services design, right? So you have to design the services. Finally, there are changes in terms of the KPIs and then a loop back. Loop back is also important because it is linked with the service of experience, quality of experience rather than quality of services, right? Zoom call or a Meets call and all those things, how do you judge whether it's a network problem or it's an application problem, right? So you need to get back into the things of understanding the states from the network and then take certain decision. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Maybe Arno, the last question of the day. In your global experience of working with telcos and maybe the other OEMs, how do you look at the integration of the systems? Because, we have a legacy of the telcos, and then we have the OEMs bringing in the new technology, and in fact, the virtualization layers with the different partners, and then the startup community coming in. And for autonomous, we have to build something maybe scalable and new. How do you think that ecosystem is currently poised at? And what could be your takeaways from a leadership standpoint that we all need to take up?
So the question that many operators struggle with is not implementing a technology in a network. If we were all greenfield networks, if we were all starting afresh and we could choose only the latest technology, then it would be easy, right? That problem to solve is not really a problem to solve. You make a choice and you implement it. The problem is that networks like Airtel has been around for a while. They have very many different vendors. The ecosystem is, I would say, they've been selected over time. The ability to implement the intelligence from a system that made an intelligent choice of a base model or of some data that you learned from into your network becomes a question of the capabilities on whether those things are API calls or CLI commands. Do I know what's going to happen when I implement that action? And currently, if you look at just operations, for instance, there's a big network operations center. There's a lot of really skilled people in there. They understand what an alarm means, what an event means, and they can action it based on their skill to work with that target environment, VNF, CNF. When we look at the autonomous networks of the future, where people are speaking about dark NOCs, no humans in the loop, there's a difference between today and that day. That day will be a couple of years down the line when refreshes of hardwares, VNF, CNF, autonomous systems have come into play. Currently, I see a future in the initial stages where the human in the loop acting on intelligence from system that assists them to be more efficient, more knowledgeable, more practical when it comes to the handling of certain events in the network. That's the near term. I think in terms of strategy long term, if mobile networks don't set in place their own strategy in terms of where they would like the outcome to be, they will always make selections in RFPs from vendors that still require my AI, my autonomous network, my silo, my appliance with my own CLI. Each time you choose a silo, that OpEx cost increases, right? Unless you can make common choices across the certain layers, like the infra layer to unlock economies of scale, or the AI layer in terms of making AI or ML ops available to your internal teams to create, to innovate, we are still far away from that inference problem. I think the problem currently is more on the learn side. Learn, grow, scale, right? And again, I see customers asking, how do I get going really fast? Because I heard there's a lot of ROI, there's a lot of use cases that will save me money. Yes, if you've already taken the initial step, the automation step, the logical choice or the actual choice to go down this path, right? So I think there's still some things to be done here, and we're happy to help with all the gentlemen here.
I think, thank you, Arno. I think human in the loop, and it's a technology driven by the humans, not the other way. I think with that, it's clearly, with the intent from the visionary leaders that even the network operations will see the autonomous and the AI paving the way. And it's clearly, as laid yesterday as well, the future is now. AI is going to be definitely a part of our daily lives and the network operations as well. I think with that, we close this session. I would like to thank all the esteemed panelists for their time, their views. I hope it's been an enlightening discussion for all of us. Thank you so much with a round of applause. Maybe any questions, maybe one question from the audience, anyone.
Sir, the question is, we are talking about the autonomous networks. I want to know what is the difference or similarity between the autonomous networks and the software-defined networks, that the SDN. How are they related or differentiated, or they're complementing each other? This is the basic question which I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind taking it because Cisco was one of the first company to coin the software-defined network. I mean, see, the software-defined network, we kind of opened up the proprietary products and software, with the API, right? I mean, it is one of the foundational block, for autonomous network, right? I mean, if you take, some of the innovations that has happened to the software-defined network, you have SD-WAN, SASE, and all of that, where we kind of integrated the different domains, right? But if you look at the autonomous network, we are more focused on, predictive and closed loop automation, where everyone talked about it, right? Can we bring some of the, AI for decision making, right? So the product will still work, as it is, right? Openness has been provided, by the SDN. But now, you are able to get a lot of telemetry data. You're able to get configurations and all of that, from the SDN. Without SDN, as a foundational block, you would not have got all that information, for the full stack observability and building all this decision making, right? So it's a complementary thing, but I would say the AI is going to make it a lot more. I mean, we're still debating about the ROI, right? But hopefully it will bring a lot more clarity, in terms of reduction of the cost, efficiency, and all those things, right?
Thank you. Any more questions? Last question, please, before we wrap up.
Hi, thank you for the wonderful session. I'm Maria from Nokia. So the question what I want to ask is, so AI being the technology which is cutting across all the industries and suppliers and collaborators of the whole ecosystem, do you see any demarcation of the market with respect to the applications which the operator versus a network provider would run the race? Or is it like there's going to be a lot of overlap and going to be less of synergy in developing those applications?
If you're both and a telco can take this question.
Yeah, so there are very clear distinctions between what would be implemented by the operators versus what would be implemented by the vendors, say for example. So if I have to take an example, let's start with the vendor side of things. So on the vendors, you get a lot of TAC 3 complaints, right? So the highest level of complaints where the network has become, recovery of the network or sorting out or troubleshooting some problem in the network becomes a serious problem. And then you have, so if we have to talk about us, we have tons and then tons of data of say last 20 years of all the TAC 3 complaints that have happened and what was the resolution that was provided. Now, if you take all of that data, run a proper modeling of that data and figure it out as to how AI can handle this particular thing, it becomes very quick and a very fast resolution whenever there is such a problem that is coming from the network. So that's one example of application where the vendors, this is true for all the vendors, whether it's Cisco, whether it's the optical vendors, or whether it is radio vendors, everybody can use this kind of an application. When you look at it from the operator standpoint, it is a very different ball game, and we have to also clearly keep in mind two different aspects of things. One is traditional AI or the machine learning part of it, and two is the generative AI part of it. So currently, from an operator standpoint, if you have to look at all the applications which would make practical sense, they are more based on pattern recognition and machine learning rather than something with the generative AI which will do more like a creation rather than something which is based on. So all the actions that need to be taken are based on capturing the data, looking at the pattern of the data, and based on that pattern taking an action in terms of solving that particular thing. And this is fundamental to what the applications, most of the applications that are being looked at by the operator four areas where different operators are looking at it from an autonomous network and implementation of AI standpoint. One is their cloud infrastructure, so that's one entity. The second entity that they are looking at it is from the deployment and automation and testing for the purpose of version upgrades or fresh deployments. That's the CI/CD part of the infrastructure. The third area, which is the most talked about area, is the operations, regular day-to-day operations, and how do you handle that part of it. And the fourth area that they are looking at, which is to me one of the most important from an ROI standpoint, it is the customer experience part of the thing. So this is the way I would summarize between the applications that
Yes,
the vendors
please.
look at it versus the operators look at it.
I can also give one more example from a vendor community perspective, like from a Arista point of view. Because we have a network data lake, we learn all the KPIs from the networks in a real-time manner, and we call it as like a state streaming using a telemetry. So in case there is a degradation happening at the optical layer, and we know that the SFP is going to go down, before even it gets down, we can proactively open a attack case and ship the SFP well in advance as a RMA, so that the customer will not have a downtime. So these are some of these practical use cases you can adopt, and you don't have to wait. So this is like, I thought, let me share one example.
I think if you have to look at what each of the entities has, data, if you look at operator, they have data not only about the network performance, but they have a lot of data around user experience, lot of business related KPIs as well. If you look at purely the infrastructure vendors, they'll have a lot of low level data around the network performance as well. Now, what is really required is for an entity to bridge this gap, where an operator would like to monetize and improve the ROI, and how do you really push your business KPIs to reflect through your network performance. So eventually I would say that I want the user experience to go up by X, but my network performance should not degrade by less than kind of Y. So you can kind of do those equations, and that will only come when you have a bridge between the two.
I just want to summarize, because there was a lot of good insights which just came out. From an operator standpoint, there are only two things which we should look at when you talk about AI. The first one is the predictive part of it, because the AI helps you to do predictive analytics. And the second most important part of it is the inferencing. A lot of data is there. You can use the data to create inferences so that you can create an action. So two words: predictive and inferencing, which will help us, to demystify, what all we can do as part of the AI and AI automation.
I think with this we end the session. A round of applause for all our esteemed panelists for their time, for their insights. Thank you so much.